Most people don't fail because they lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity. They fail because they're waiting for confidence to arrive, waiting for motivation to show up, waiting for someone to notice them, fund them, promote them, choose them, or tell them it's finally time. That waiting feels harmless, even reasonable, but it's one of the most expensive habits you can have, because while you're waiting for a signal, life is moving on without you. We grow up absorbing this quiet idea that eventually someone will step in. A teacher, a boss, a partner, a system, some external force that will recognize our potential and unlock the door. And when that doesn't happen right away, we assume something's wrong, with the timing, with the world, or with us. So we pause. We hesitate. We delay action just a little longer. But here's the truth most people don't want to face. That rescue fantasy is what keeps you stuck. Waiting becomes a disguise for fear. It sounds responsible, but it's actually avoidance. You tell yourself you're being patient, when really you're trying to avoid the discomfort of starting before you feel ready. You're avoiding the risk of being visible, of being wrong, of failing in public, and the longer you wait, the more convincing the excuse becomes. Eventually, waiting feels like a strategy, when it's actually inertia. The world doesn't reward potential. It responds to movement. It doesn't care how capable you are in theory. It reacts to what you're willing to do in reality. Momentum only shows up after action, never before it. And the people who move forward aren't the ones who feel the most prepared. They're the ones who stop expecting permission. When you let go of the idea that someone is coming to save you, something surprising happens. The pressure lifts. You stop performing for approval and start experimenting. You stop trying to look ready and start getting better. Responsibility stops feeling like a weight and starts feeling like leverage. Because now if things improve, it's because you made them improve. And if they don't, you have the power to adjust. This shift is uncomfortable at first. There's no one left to blame, no one else to credit, just you and the work. But that discomfort is a signal that you're finally dealing with reality instead of fantasy. And reality, while demanding, is workable. You can build in reality. You can iterate in reality. You can win in reality. The people who eventually change industries, build meaningful things, or reshape their own lives all come to the same quiet realization. Waiting didn't protect them. It delayed them. Progress began the moment they stopped hoping to be chosen and decided to choose themselves. No one is coming. And that's exactly when you start moving. Once you stop waiting to be rescued, the next realization hits hard. And this is where many people hesitate. Responsibility. That word alone makes people tense up. It sounds heavy, restrictive, even unfair. We're taught to associate responsibility with pressure, with obligation, with everything that limits our freedom. But that's a misunderstanding. Responsibility isn't the thing that traps you. Avoiding it is. When you don't take responsibility, you still pay a cost. You just pay it in frustration, in excuses, in quiet resentment. You give away control while telling yourself it's temporary. You blame the system, the timing, the market, your past, your circumstances. And sometimes those things really are difficult. But blaming them doesn't change anything. It only delays the moment you realize that your life will move in the direction of whoever is making the decisions. And if that isn't you, someone else will do it for you. The moment you take responsibility, something shifts internally. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what can I do with what's in front of me? That question alone is power. Because now you're not dependent on conditions being perfect. You're working with reality as it is, not as you wish it were. And that's where real leverage lives. Responsibility doesn't mean you control everything. It means you control your response. You control whether you learn or repeat. You control whether you adapt or stay rigid. You control whether setbacks become data or excuses. That's not a small thing. It's the difference between being reactive and being strategic. People often say they want freedom, but what they're really asking for is relief from discomfort. True freedom comes from competence, and competence comes from ownership. When you take responsibility, you build skill. When you build skill, you build confidence. And when you build confidence, you stop needing constant reassurance from the outside world. There's also something deeply energizing about ownership. When success happens, it's earned. When failure happens, it's instructive. Nothing is wasted. Every outcome becomes useful. You're no longer emotionally dependent on praise or discouraged by criticism, because you know exactly where the work came from and where it needs to go next. This mindset compounds over time. Small decisions made consistently start stacking in your favor. You become someone others can rely on because you rely on yourself first. And paradoxically, that's when opportunities start showing up. Not because you waited for them, but because you became capable of handling them. Responsibility doesn't shrink your life. It expands it. It turns uncertainty into a problem you can work on instead of a threat you have to avoid. It replaces helplessness with agency. And once you feel that shift, you realize something important. Power isn't given to you when you're ready. It's built the moment you decide to carry it. Take responsibility, and the world starts to move with you, instead of over you. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in small daily ways. You knew it needed to be done, and you didn't do it. You felt the pull towards something meaningful, and you postponed it. You told yourself you'd start tomorrow, or next month, or when things settled down. That's not laziness. That's self-betrayal. Self-betrayal rarely looks like giving up. It looks like staying busy with the wrong things. Looks like choosing comfort over alignment, approval over truth, familiarity over growth. You convince yourself you're being practical, when really you're avoiding the internal friction that comes from doing what you know matters. And over time, those small compromises add up. Not into failure, but into disconnection. From your instincts, your confidence, and eventually your sense of direction. You delay the conversation you need to have. You delay the decision you already understand. And each delay sends a quiet message to yourself. I don't trust my own judgment yet. That message is corrosive. Because trust isn't built by thinking, it's built by following through. The moment you stop waiting, that pattern breaks. You start noticing how often you already know the answer. You know which habit is draining you. You know which path is misaligned. You know what you've been avoiding because it carries risk or responsibility. Ending self-betrayal isn't about dramatic change. It's about honoring those signals instead of silencing them. This is where real strength begins to form. When your actions match your internal standards, you don't need to perform confidence. You feel it. You don't need motivation. You generate momentum. You stop splitting your energy between who you are and who you pretend to be. That internal coherence is rare, and it's powerful. People can sense it. Opportunities respond to it. But more importantly, you trust yourself again. That trust changes how you move through the world. You stop over-explaining. You stop seeking constant reassurance. You're willing to make decisions faster because you're no longer outsourcing responsibility for the outcome. If something fails, you adjust. If it works, you build on it. Either way, you're no longer at war with yourself. Most people think winning is about beating others. It's not. It's about ending the quiet habit of abandoning your own standard. The moment you stop waiting for permission and start acting in alignment with what you already know, your energy consolidates. Your direction sharpens. And progress stops feeling forced. The fastest way forward is simple. Stop breaking promises to yourself. Once you stop betraying yourself, you expect things to get easier, cleaner, more comfortable. But that's not how growth works. What actually happens is the opposite. Things get more uncertain, more exposed, more uncomfortable. And that's usually the moment people assume they've made a mistake. They think if this were right, it wouldn't feel this hard. That assumption is what pulls them back. Discomfort isn't a warning sign. It's a transition signal. It shows up whenever you're stepping out of a familiar identity and into a new one. Your old patterns knew how to keep you safe, even if they kept you small. A new direction doesn't have that certainty yet, so your nervous system reacts. Doubt increases. Resistance shows up, and if you're not careful, you interpret that resistance as failure instead of progress. Most people are trained to avoid discomfort at all costs. They optimize for stability, predictability, and approval. But nothing meaningful is built that way. Every breakthrough requires operating without a complete map. You have to make decisions with incomplete data. You have to act before confidence arrives. And that feels unstable. Not because you're wrong, but because you're early. There's a subtle difference between pain that damages you and discomfort that develops you. One erodes your capacity. The other expands. The only way to tell the difference is by what happens after. If you're learning, adapting, getting sharper, you're not failing, you're training. The problem is that training doesn't feel like success while it's happening. It feels awkward, inefficient, uncertain. This is why so many capable people stall. They mistake discomfort for incompetence. They assume that if they were truly good at something, it would feel smooth right away. But smoothness is the byproduct of repetition, not a prerequisite for starting. Mastery comes from staying present through the phase where everything feels fragile. When you learn to tolerate discomfort, you gain a strategic advantage. You can stay in the room longer than others. You don't panic when results lag behind effort. You understand that tension is temporary, but growth compounds. That patience isn't passive, it's active endurance. Discomfort also forces clarity. When things feel easy, you can coast. When they feel hard, you have to prioritize. You have to decide what matters enough to push through resistance. That decision sharpens your values and filters out distractions. You stop chasing everything and start committing to something. The people who eventually win aren't fearless. They're familiar with discomfort. They've stopped treating it like an enemy and started using it as feedback. They don't ask, how do I avoid this feeling? They ask, what is this teaching me? If you can stay with the discomfort without retreating into old habits, something shifts. What once felt threatening starts to feel like capacity expanding, and that's when you realize you're not behind. You're becoming. Discomfort isn't the cost of failure. It's the price of becoming strong. After you learn to carry responsibility, stop betraying yourself and stay steady through discomfort. Something unexpected happens in your relationships. You don't become colder. You don't pull away from people. You actually show up more clearly. Independence doesn't isolate you. It stabilizes you. It stabilizes you. Instability changes everything about how you connect with others. A lot of people think they want connection, but what they're really looking for is relief. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from self-doubt. Relief from having to carry their own weight. So they lean emotionally, psychologically, sometimes financially, on partners, friends, teams, or institutions. And that leaning feels like closeness at first. But over time, it turns into pressure. Expectations grow. Resentment creeps in, and connection starts to feel fragile. When you rely on someone else to complete you, you put them in an impossible position. They're no longer just sharing life with you. They're responsible for your sense of safety, direction, or worth. That's not intimacy. That's dependency. That's dependency. And dependency eventually collapses under its own weight. Real connection starts when you don't need to be rescued. When you're grounded in your own choices, your own standards, your own direction. You stop asking others to fill gaps they were never meant to fill. You're not with people because you're afraid to be alone. You're with them because you choose them. That choice carries a completely different energy. Independence sharpens honesty. You're less likely to perform, manipulate, or over-explain. You don't need constant reassurance, so you can actually listen. You can disagree without panicking. You can collaborate without losing yourself. That's when trust becomes real, because it's no longer based on fear of abandonment, but on mutual respect. This applies beyond personal relationships. Teams work better when people own their responsibilities. Creativity thrives when individuals bring strength, not insecurity, into the room. The strongest partnerships, romantic, professional, or otherwise, aren't built on need. They're built on alignment. There's also a paradox here. The more capable you become on your own, the more valuable you are to others. Not because you're trying to be impressive, but because you're reliable. You do what you say you'll do. You regulate yourself under pressure. You don't collapse when things get hard. That kind of presence is rare, and it attracts real collaboration. Independence doesn't mean you don't ask for help. It means you don't confuse help with rescue. You can seek input without giving up agency. You can accept support without surrendering responsibility. That balance is what turns connection into a multiplier instead of a crutch. When you stand on your own, relationships stop being a place to hide and start being a place to build. You bring strength to the table instead of expectations. And from that place, connection becomes deeper, cleaner, and far more resilient. Stand on your own feet first, and then choose who walks with you. By the time you reach this point, your definition of winning starts to change. It's no longer about applause, attention, or proving anything to anyone. In fact, most of the real progress you've made happened quietly. No announcements, no dramatic turning points, Just a series of internal decisions that most people never see. That's what real winning looks like. We're surrounded by a culture that celebrates visible success, metrics, headlines, milestones that can be posted and compared. But those are lagging indicators. They show up after the work has already been done. Long before anything looks impressive from the outside, something has stabilized on the inside. You stopped waiting. You took responsibility. You stayed aligned. You learned to sit with discomfort. You stood on your own. That internal shift is the real achievement. Winning is the moment you trust yourself under pressure. When uncertainty shows up and you don't panic. When things don't go as planned and you don't collapse into excuses. When progress is slow and you don't abandon the process. That calm persistence doesn't look dramatic, but it's incredibly powerful. It means your confidence is no longer conditional on outcomes. There's also a kind of silence that comes with this stage. You don't need to broadcast every move. You don't need constant validation. You're less reactive to criticism and less intoxicated by praise. Not because you don't care, but because you know where your footing is. You're anchored. And from that place, decisions get cleaner. This is deeply personal work. No one can do it for you, and no one can really see it while it's happening. That's why so few people stick with it. There's no immediate reward for becoming internally solid, but over time, that solidity changes everything. You become harder to derail. You recover faster. You think longer term. You stop trading your future for short-term comfort. Ironically, this is often when external success starts to follow. Not because you chased it, but because your internal system can finally support it. You're not distracted by insecurity. You're not pulled in 10 directions by other people's expectations. You're focused, consistent, reliable, and those qualities compound. Winning isn't about reaching a finish line where everything is perfect. It's about building a relationship with yourself that can handle reality as it is. It's about knowing that no matter what changes outside, you can respond intelligently inside. Most people are trying to look successful. Very few are trying to become resilient. But resilience is what lasts. It's what allows you to keep building when motivation fades, when conditions shift, when the noise gets loud. And once you have that, you're no longer dependent on momentum. You created. This winning doesn't announce itself. It shows up as quiet confidence, steady progress, and the certainty that whatever comes next, you'll handle it. That's the win that can't be taken from you.